Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So y'all saw my email, so you probably are aware that the ADS Classic, which has been around since the early 90s, is going away sometime this summer. We don't have an exact date, tentatively scheduled for May, but probably sometime this summer. And we'll let y'all know more as we get closer to that date. So I'm glad y'all are here learning about the system now before you're forced to when we turn off Classic and everybody panics. So we'd prefer that you ask us questions now while we can still help you figure that out and there's less of a sense of panic about that. There's a few things you should know if you are active users of Classic before Classic goes away. First of all, your user account in Classic, if you have one, will not transfer automatically to the new system. So if you have a user account in Classic and you want one of the new ADS, you need to go into the new ADS and make that account manually. Also, if you have any private collections, private libraries associated with Classic, we also will not transfer those for you automatically. A lot of people have a lot of junk in there, so they don't necessarily want us to transfer it. We have stale user accounts and all of that. So we're not doing that for you automatically. Once you make your new account in the new system, we have a nice importer tool. You just enter in your credentials for Classic in the new system, and then you can import all of your libraries over wholesale. So it's really easy to do, but you do have to do it yourself. Also, eventually, if you are subscribed to the My ADS daily or weekly emails about new stuff that's coming up in archive that maybe is relevant to your research interests or new published articles, we don't yet have that available in the new system, but we will very shortly. And so eventually we'll send out emails to the My ADS subscribers, but just so this is on your horizon, you will need to sign up most likely or do some sort of transfer. And again, we'll let you know more about that just so that y'all are aware that that's coming up. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with the actual demo. So when you come to the new system, this modern form up here, this is what it's going to drop you on automatically. You can see there's just a single search box. There's all these links up here, this drop down, and a bunch of search examples. So this is sort of the canonical new ADS form. However, if you really liked the old system, if you like that multi-box search interface, if you click on Classic Form up here in this tab, we've reproduced the old Classic interface, search interface, here in the new system, and it works basically exactly the same way that Classic did. So that's a nice way for transferring over. You should know, though, that some of our more advanced functionality, which I'll talk to you about in a second, is not necessarily available from the Classic form. But if you're just trying to find a specific paper given an author and a year, you can use this without a problem. It'll work exactly the same. However, in order to use our more advanced functionality through the rest of this demo, I'm going to use the modern form. I would encourage you, if you're doing something like a literature search or something like that, to use the modern form because it just gives you more flexibility in exactly what you're looking for. So let's start with a quick search. Say I am looking for a Nobel Prize winning paper, Reese et al., 1998. I'm just typing the author and the year into the search box, just like you normally would. If y'all were familiar with that up caret in front of the first author, that functionality still works in the new system. And you'll notice I've just typed in the year just without anything on it. So let's see what this gives us. So we've got 6 search results. Automatically sorted in reverse chronological order. And you can see we have, this is probably the paper we're looking for. It's got lots of citations. However, it's 4th in our list. Part of that is because we've got a couple papers that are not from 1998. This one is from 2009, this one's from 1999. But you were looking for a paper that was from 1998. So what happened is we don't necessarily parse 1998 as in your search query. We don't necessarily parse that as a year. So what we're doing is when you type something into this box without any one of these tags attached to it, we basically search all of the metadata for all of our articles to find that query. So probably what happened if I went to look at this 2009 paper, probably they mentioned their 1998 paper like in the abstract or something, and that's why it's coming up. So it was 1998 was found, it just wasn't found in the year. So if you want to make sure that you're finding exactly what you're looking for as quickly as possible, I would recommend adding one of these search tags. So you can either click on these search tags from up here. This dropdown has a lot more, or you can start typing it. So for year, it's actually pretty simple. If you type a Y, you can see that the autocomplete starts to fill in. So if you type the Y and then you press enter or return, it will automatically accept that autocomplete, and then it puts the cursor right where it needs to be so you can keep typing. So Y, enter, and then 1998. If we try that, then now we only have 4 search results, and all of them were published in 1998 like you would expect. And again, this one is 2nd in the list, not 1st in the list. It's because we're doing some sort of date sort and it's a slightly more complicated sort. But at least it gives you a lot fewer results so you can find exactly what you're looking for. Okay, so let's do something slightly more complicated. So some of the advanced functionality that I alluded to earlier, we actually have full text search in the new system now. So we did not we did not really offer full text searching in Classic. You could search for like the abstract, you could search the title, but now you can search for actually within the full body of a paper. So this is really nice if you're trying to find something that's maybe not the sole point of a paper, but you're just trying to find all mentions of, whatever your search term is within a paper. So we have full text now for basically all refereed journal articles in astronomy and physics from the last 20 years, and for some journals even farther back than that. Thank you. Even farther back than that. Also, we have full text for most of the archive. So for a lot of things. We have about 13 million records altogether in the system, and we have full text for about almost 5 million of those papers. So quite a big chunk of our papers do have full text for them. So if I want to do full text search for LIGO, you can see I just typed out the search tag full, and then I typed in LIGO. The system is smart enough to know that LIGO both means LIGO, the acronym, and also LIGO spelled out to its full name, whatever, large something, I don't know, observatory, sure. You can see this gives us a lot of results, 15,000. Again, we are sorted in reverse chronology. So say you wanted the most, maybe you were looking for the gravitational wave source discovery papers. Probably those are some of the most cited papers. You could come up here and sort by citation count. This would have been helpful, again, when we were trying to find that Nobel Prize winning paper earlier, but now you get it. So lots of very highly cited papers. Interestingly enough, you can see this WMAP paper is at the top. So apparently it's more highly cited than some of the discovery papers. Give them time, I guess. So since we do have 15,000 results, and maybe it's a little harder for us to find exactly what we're looking for with this many, this is a time when you might want to look over here and use the left side filters. If you click on one of these, it will basically narrow your search results to whatever you've clicked. So if I only want refereed journal articles, I click refereed, and then I do limit to. And now we're not looking at conference proceedings and other things like that. We're only looking at refereed articles. So that cuts us down some. We still have the WMAP paper on top. So maybe we do want to limit it a little bit more, and maybe these left side filters aren't necessarily helpful for exactly what we're doing. So say I am trying to find like a specific detection paper. So I can use object and then type in, which object did I want? And then we type in the identifier for what that object is. So you can see I've modified my original query. This facet up here where I only wanted referee papers is still there. So since I'm modifying this query up here in this search box, we're assuming that you're still refining your original search. And that if you wanted to start a brand new search, you would click over here on Start New Search, and then it would clear out everything that you had selected. You could also, if you just wanted to remove stuff one by one, just click the little X right here. If you only want to get rid of one of those. Otherwise, if you click Start New Search, that clears everything for you right away. So now you can see, since I'm looking for LIGO papers with just this object on there, we're down to 300 something papers. I resort by citation count. And here we go. Here's our detection paper that we're probably looking for. It's got a lot of citations. That seems reasonable. Okay, so let's start a new search again. And this is sort of more advanced functionality that you may not be aware of. So these bid groups are curated collections of articles that are curated mostly by people who are not ADS staff. So there's librarians at Chandra, there's librarians at Keck that are curating groups of papers that have something to do with their organization. And they're going through and picking those by hand. So since they've done all of that hard work for us, we will take that collection from them, and they update it regularly. We'll take that collection from them and index it within ADS. So that way you also can make use of all the hard work that the librarians and the curators are doing for you. And you don't have to go try to find all the Chandra papers yourself or something like that. There's a whole team at Chandra that does just that. So this bib group that I've typed in, CXC, is Chandra. I'll note that we are going to rename it to something like Chandra in the future. It hasn't happened yet, but soon. But for right now, CXC means Chandra. So if we want to go see what those papers are, we can just look at these. You can see the librarians and curators there have been hard at work. There's 18,000 papers in that collection. And then this works just like anything else. You can use the left side filters to narrow down to maybe refereed articles or by certain authors. Anything that you would with a regular search, you can manipulate within here. I do want to take the opportunity, though, to show you about the stuff over here in this Explore menu. So Explore is where, if you had picked up the search tips and tricks on the backside, there's all those pretty visualizations on the backside of that flyer. And this is where all those visualizations are from. So I'll show you some of these. So one thing that's of use to a lot of people is the citation metrics. And basically, we are, of course, collecting data about all of your citations for all of your papers. We're also collecting a lot more information. Takes a little while to load these. We're also collecting information about the number of times one of your papers has been read in ADS. So anytime somebody clicks on the abstract to actually go read the full abstract, or if they click on the PDF link to go read the full text of your paper, we count that as a read within ADS, and I'll show you that information here. So we have a nice histogram of the number of papers as a function of year. Oh, and I will note that we are showing metrics just for the first 6,000 records, which makes sense why this only goes back for so far back. And then, yeah, so then with citations, we have this histogram of when all the citations happened. Everything's broken down. There's a lot of different ways to break it down. We have the number of self-citations, so the number of times somebody cited their own paper. All sorts of other stats that you can look at. If you don't know what something is, just hover over one of the little question marks, and it'll tell you exactly how we're doing that calculation. And then the reads that I was telling you about is the next thing down. So again, there's all sorts of different stats for the reads. So you can play with this data however you like. And then finally, the indices. I'm not going to load these right now, but basically it's a graph of things like the H-index and other indices as a function of time. And there's all sorts of other indices other than the H-index here. So there's like the Torrey index, the I-100 index. If you don't know what these are, I don't necessarily know what they are. Again, just hover over the question mark and it'll tell you exactly how we were calculating that. So that can be really fun for a lot of people to play with, especially when you're supposed to be writing like grant proposals or something and you don't want to. Not that we know anything about that. Okay, so let's also look. I'm going to go ahead and resort these by citation count because that will make the next visualization a little more meaningful. So the next visualization is the paper network. So if you're looking at papers on a specific topic, this paper network will basically form a cluster or perform a clustering algorithm on that set of search results that you have. So we look for clusters of papers that cite each other more or that cite the same references more and consider those a cluster. We think that they must be topically similar to each other. And then within each cluster, we have an algorithm that will go and pull out some of the most common words in that cluster of papers. And that's what we've mapped here. Each of these clusters is in a different color, and then the words are just the most common words, most common unique words within that cluster. So in the Chandra papers, you can see, there's some neutron, remnant, pulsar stuff. There's some lensing stuff. There's some jet stuff. All of those sound familiar, like that seems reasonable for what would be in the Chandra papers. Over here on the right side, it shows how many papers were published as a function of time for each of those clusters. And again, we've sorted these by citation count, so there's some extra systematics in here. But you can see some of the most cited papers earlier in the century were these like neutron remnant pulsar papers. And now there may be like less popular than maybe some of the Spitzer papers or something like that. So this is kind of fun if you're doing a topic search, especially for new students. Maybe they don't know exactly what they're reading about yet. If they're doing a literature search, then they can come and go look at this visualization and see what the most popular subtopics are within a grouping of papers. Okay, for the last visualization I want to show you, we need to limit this to a specific author. Bill Foreman was here last time, so I used him as a guinea pig, so we'll go ahead and do that again, even though he's not here this time. Okay, so Bill Foreman, 332 papers within the Chandra group. Now, if I go to the author network, so this is most useful if you're looking up a specific author. So again, for students, if they're looking up their advisor, if they're looking up the colloquium speaker or something, they can come perform this search on a specific author. And then what this shows is it shows who this author's co-author groupings were. So it looks like Bill has a bunch of different groups of co-authors he works with. This purple group, as you can see over here on this side, has been one of his most productive groups. If we wanted to see what those papers included, you click on this and it shows you all of the papers within that purple grouping. So for some people, they might see, they had one group that they worked with during their dissertation years, one group that they worked with a lot during their postdoc years, and then a couple of different groups that they worked on while they were faculty. So you can see how different topics and how different groups were more productive with time. So really useful if you're on a hiring committee or something and you want to know who somebody's working with, you can come look at this way. It may not always be obvious by looking at somebody's group of papers, like who all they're collaborating with most often. So this can be really fun to come play with. Okay, so that's sort of the main list of things that most people will be doing, performing, most common searches that people will be doing within the system. There's a couple of things that can make your life easier though. So if you do have a user account, so I am signed into my user account right now, you'll notice that you have some options to customize settings. So some of the settings that you may want to customize. So right now I'm over here on my library link server setting, and I have set my current library to be Harvard. And what that means is when I go and click on an abstract and it gives me links out to go click on PDFs, I can click on the archive PDF or whatever. That doesn't matter what institution I'm at. If I want to look at the publisher link and it's behind a paywall though, it is most helpful if you've set your library link server. So now, since I've set mine as Harvard, if I click through to something that's behind a paywall, it will automatically prompt me to log in using my Harvard key, and then it will make it, it will just push me past the paywall and I'm all signed in and everything's fine. If you haven't set this, it can be a little more complicated to get behind the paywall, depending on how your university has done it. One other thing that's really useful is over here under application settings, this changes how the website will work for you. So if you have some specific needs that you want to have a website remember about you, if you come over here to application settings, you can basically set that. So there's a bunch of stuff here, like how many authors do you want available to be immediately visible in your search results, things like that. Stuff that's probably the defaults are fine for most people, but you might want to come look. One thing that may be useful for a lot of you is if you only want to search astronomy papers by default, if you don't really care about physics papers, you don't care about stuff that may be of general interest like chemistry papers, if you come over here and click on astronomy, it will automatically only search for astronomy related articles for you. There's sort of a good side and a bad side to that. Some of the papers that are in more general interest journals, like in Nature and things like that, if we know that a paper is astronomy, we do classify it as astronomy. However, it requires somebody to tell us, right, that a paper is astronomy. So you may miss some papers if you're only looking at astronomy papers, but for the most part, your search results are going to be a lot smaller and a lot more focused. So you're more likely to find what you need quickly. So play around with this. You can try setting this. It's also available in the left sidebar. So if you're getting 15,000 results and you know most of them aren't relevant, try clicking on the astronomy filter over on the left side. See if it helps. If you find that you're doing that a lot, then come in here and just set this, and then it's automatically done for you. You don't have to do it again. And there's a few other things here. If you have custom export formats that you want to set, some people do that for how they keep their bibliographies. You can play with that. So if you do have a user account in ADS, I would encourage you to come look at the settings occasionally and just see what's in here and see if anything's relevant to you. We are occasionally adding new stuff to this. And one final thing I want to say is if you click over here on the About, there's a lot of resources for you as you're learning to use the new system as we continue through development. So our help pages have a lot in them. We keep this pretty well updated. So the Quick Start guides, there's links on the flyers, but basically the Quick Start guides are sort of step-by-step guides on how to do specific tasks within the new system. So just trying to find a specific paper, trying to build a library, things like that. So go look at those if you get confused. We also, of course, have frequently asked questions. We do also now have this What's New page. So if you've noticed something's changed a little bit in the interface and you're curious about it, come to the What's New page. We've probably updated it with that information. We send out, or we update this page once a month at the end of the month with everything new that's happened in the system over that month. If you don't want to remember to do this, but you're still curious, you can sign up for monthly email updates. And once a month, you'll get an email with basically everything that's in here, in addition to updated blog posts and things like that. And then also, we do have a blog, like I mentioned. We try to put a new post up about once a month, so you can keep an eye out for that as well. Okay, and I think that's it. If y'all have any questions, just let us know. Thanks.
Is there a definition, when you said big group, say it's C?
Yep.
Is there like a definition of what that means? Does it mean just mention CAD, or does it mean using CAD data?
It's really up to the person who does the curation and how they've decided to define that. Yeah. So yeah, since we're sort of hands-off about that, I know Chandra, the original CXC post group was basically anything I think that was relevant or that mention Chandra or use Chandra data. They've now started a new big group that's Chandra Technical. So I think that's some of the more like instrumentation focused papers. But it really depends on the group.
Where we know it, we've linked in the help, it'll say this the semantics of why, how they were chosen.
Yeah, good question.
So how does ADS interact with ORCID? A lot of us are recommended.
Yeah.
Sign up.
Yeah, so we have full ORCID integration. So actually that's a good question. Let me show you, I'll show you how mine works. So right now I am signed into ORCID under my own name. And basically we just have like, you can, if you have an ORCID ID, then you can sign into ORCID and we'll send you to the ORCID website and then drop you back in ADS. And we receive a full list of your papers from ORCID. So this is a listing of all of my papers that I've claimed in ORCID, which is nice, but say, you know I haven't maybe claimed all of my papers. If I go search my name, then, and I make sure my ORCID mode is turned on. So if you're gonna go claim papers, make sure your ORCID mode, this little slider toggle is turned on. And then you'll see now there's a bar that shows up under every search result. So it looks like most of the papers under my name I've claimed, so this is not one of my papers, so I'm not gonna click this. But if this was one of my papers, then I could click this claim in ORCID, and then we would push that paper to your ORCID record. So if you went and looked at your paper or your record in ORCID.org, then it would show that paper there. And then we have a processing pipeline where we basically go look at the papers that you have said are yours, and we go and check the names and make sure that your name appears in that list and that we think it's a reasonable match. We're trying to keep spammers and stuff out of this. If we think that that's a good match, then we will index it in our system. So what that means is, so basically this is, only I can see this view of my ORCID profile. If I want other people to see it, then if I search by my ORCID ID, so now everything that I have claimed myself and that ADS has approved as a good match will show up when you search by your ORCID ID here. I'll note that that pipeline only runs overnight. So if you've made a claim, you'll need to come back and check the next day to see if it's been approved. We're also looking into adding more notifications. So if for some reason we reject one of your claims, maybe you forgot that maybe your name changed or something, you didn't let us know, so we don't think it's you. We're working on doing some notifications to tell you a little bit more and be a little more transparent about that. In the meantime, if one of your claims gets rejected and you think it shouldn't have been, first of all, check and make sure like your name is actually on the paper. If it's like a conference proceeding and the author is the LIGO collaboration and you're one of the LIGO collaborators, but your name's not actually in the list, we'll probably reject that paper. But otherwise, if you think that it should have been approved and it wasn't, just email us and we'll go look at it.
What about if the institution has changed?
That doesn't matter.
Maybe you should mention that there's a blog entry about claiming papers with ORCID. So if you start from scratch, there's a good introductory.
Yeah, so if you come over here to our blog and just do a search for ORCID, we have claiming papers. There's like help pages and stuff, but this blog post about claiming papers and then finding people with ORCID is really helpful to get started. Yeah, good question.
It may not happen that often with other people, but I don't always have to be logged in Harvard, and I'm always on the laptop. And so I'm on Edge Road a lot of times. And so I search in ADS and it just says nothing found. It doesn't say you're not logged into Harvard, or there are 900 things, but you can't see them because you're not logged into Harvard. It'd be nice to have some kind of message because I didn't know what was going on.
Well, it should still give you the search results. Okay, we'll have to look more at that later because we don't actually check to make sure you're logged into anything.
Okay,
Yeah, the search results are open to the world. So you'll see, links from like Wikipedia and stuff. Yeah. So something else is weird.
Okay.
Yeah, most that would happen, you should even see, if you're not logged in, you'll even still see the links over on the right-hand side to click through. It's just, then you'll hit the paywall once you try to click through.
Yeah. That's what I thought. Okay, good.
Yeah, so let's look at that after. Yeah.
All right, and then I was trying to find a paper by Owen Jidrich, and I need to get the reference. I'm going to get the ADS code as a reference. So if I go and I do just Owen's search and I get Kepler in the universe,
Here, I can do that.
Go,
Owens,
yes.
and then
Owen is just his first name.
Oh, okay.
Gingrich.
Gingrich. Gerich.
Like that.
Common, yes,
Yep.
thank you.
And then
Yeah, and then
Kepler.
no title, just don't worry about the title for now. And then, okay, there you go. So click on Kepler and Universe. That's a book, and you don't have a copy of it, and great, there's the big code, and we copied that and reference it. Okay, if you go down a little bit further, and you get the,
That's actually not a book, that's a.
for whatever reason.
Oh, PhD
that's
thesis.
the thing.
Yeah.
Go down to number 12 is the critical importance of process diagram. And that's the paper that I want to reference. And when I click on that, it takes me directly to the paper, which is great, but I can't find any reference code that I can use. Oh, okay, all right, so that's fine. All right, so now, okay, when I click on that, so the dots are part of it, or is that?
Yes.
It's not, so that's not condensed or anything, it's actually
No.
there.
Yeah. So the bit code is it's a ADS identifier that we've made up. So it's always 19 digits. If we don't have enough letters and numbers to fill it out, we have the dots in there. And all of those things in there have meanings. So it's of course the year. The next few letters are the bib stem, so it's an abbreviation for the publication, volume, page, and then the last digit is the first letter of the first author's last name. That's what that means. Yeah. And yeah, the dots just kind of fill it in because it has to be 19 characters. Yeah.
Sorry,
Oh, you're fine.
Just the abstract.
Yeah.
Something.
I will note that's a good point though while we're here is if you're trying to put this paper into like a bibliography, click on export citation and it will give you the BibTeX format. You can also, we have a zillion other formats. And so then you can just copy and paste this. You can even use this copy to clipboard and then paste it into your .bib file for when you're. You can also do this if you click on export. This will automatically export basically all the papers in the, I think, on the page of the search results. Or if you've selected just a couple of these, it will export the selected papers to BibTeX or whatever you want. Yeah.
So if I want to find number of publications out of CFA as a whole organization, what would you recommend?
It's like we set you up for this. So we have a brand new function called affiliations that Carolyn and our curators have been working on for months. Where previously, if you were trying to find all papers by people at the CFA, you had to know everything that somebody may call CFA. So CFA, Center for Astrophysics, Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. There's lots of variations. Same thing for all the other institutions, right? So now the curators have done a lot of hard work of trying to match all of those. So now we know CFA and Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics are the same place. So it's we're still working on getting it fully implemented in the system. But for now, let's go ahead. I'm going to cheat here and just use Bill because he has a fairly unique name. So say we found all of these W. Foreman papers. We don't know which ones are CFA papers. If I click over here on this affiliations facet, we have, you can see we have SI and then we have CFA. So if we click on CFA now, that will limit the search results to all papers by a W. Foreman who use CFA in one of its forms as the affiliation.
If it has to be CFA or Center for Astrophysics, it also count as a CFA.
It will also count as a CFA. So any of those variations will count as a CFA. So for right now, you do have to use this left side facet, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, Carolyn.
You can do app colon.
Oh, you can,
in the search
okay.
box.
Although it's not.
That's not the normalized version.
Okay, that doesn't quite work yet. Okay, so that don't use that one yet. Stay tuned. We're still working on cleaning that up. If you use the left sidebar though, that will work. Yeah.
And what about SAO or HCO?
Yeah. So you could.
Those are also part of this.
Yes. So if do we have is HTO considered part of CFA or is it like a child?
CFA, it's a child.
Okay. So if you want to make sure,
So, if you go down, there should be a Harvard.
I had to get rid of some of my stuff. Oh, he's not at HCO. Okay. So if you did want HCO, well, since he's not part of HCO, we'll be there.
Yeah, Harvard, if you expand Smithsonian, we've got CFA and SAO. If you expand Harvard, there's CFA. There would also be Harvard College Observatory if any of the authors had Harvard College Observatory.
But yes, if you did want to include both CFA and SAO, maybe he used one or the other, you could either select both of these or you could just select the top level one, which would select everything for you. And then that would look for anything CFA related and anything SAO related. And when we finish this, we'll have more announcements on the blog and everything. And we're going to actually have a talk just like this at office hours sometime this spring about this specifically once we get it finished.
Yeah, and just to point out that this is a bit of a special case, but CFA also happens to have a bibliographic group that is curated by our librarian. So if you want all of the publications published by someone at the CFA according to the official CFA bibliography, you can find this big group called CFA. We'll get all of those.
Yeah, right here.
And that's, again, that's done by hand, searching for the names of people working here. So whether the affiliation was specified in the paper or not, a librarian will have vetted that paper and inserted it in the library, in the bibliographic group.
Yeah, but if you're, looking for somebody who's not at CFA, then
Yeah, that will
Yeah.
work.
So that's commonly relevant.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've got a question. So if you're looking, say, at historical use of the term or field, then you're only so complete going backwards, right? Because you don't have that local text PDFs going back forever, right?
yes, we do for a lot. We've done OCR on a lot of scans and things like that. So we do have more full text than you would have expected. It's not necessarily just stuff that's digital only. One thing we're working on right now is we're working on what we're calling a journals database. We've got somebody working on the full text to try to figure out what exactly we do have full text for and how complete we are for various journals. Again, there'll be a talk on that later this spring at office hours, but she's right in the middle of that analysis, and we're trying to figure out how best to make that available, that information available to people. At the very least, on like if you clicked on one of these abstracts, and we think this will be fairly quick, we'd like to just have an indication if full text is available for a specific paper, but trying to figure out how to convey for which journals, for how far back. We have full text is a little bit more complicated, so we're still working on that, but hopefully sometime this year we'll have that available.
Do you have an example search that you would want to do on historical content?
Yeah, I mean, just arts chamber studies.
I mean, yeah, you can always try and see. I think one fun thing is to occasionally you'll see in the Facebook group, astronomers Facebook group, people say, who used the, what was the latest one? Hot Jupiters, the term hot Jupiters for the first time.
Yeah.
So here you can actually search the full text. And according to it, yes, this is what we found. Sometimes you'd be surprised because what we find there is some combination of hot and Jupiter next to each other, even if they're not used with that intent.
Yeah, if there's like a comma in between or a period in between.
But it's still, it's still a short list that you would want to review and then figure it out. So I think it's actually always interesting to do this stuff first. Exoplanets, that kind of.
Yeah, all like black holes. So
Yeah.
One thing I'll show you too is if you are trying to say look up hot Jupiters, and you're not sure if it's one of those cases where it's not real, let's do a reverse date search. And then if I do show highlights, so what this does is it goes and looks to see where that term was used in that record. So you can see here, hot as Jupiter, that's not useful for you. This one has a semicolon. So you can, looks like 1972, maybe the first mention of a hot Jupiter, at least according to the full text holdings we have. But these highlights are really useful when you're trying to parse something like that, especially full text. So it's just this highlights button up here. It does take a little bit of additional time to load, so if you're on a slow connection, that's why we don't do it automatically. Any other questions? Do we have any questions online? Good. Okay.
Is there any way, I don't know how to do this, I don't know if it's possible to search for a combination of person and affiliation? Because if you search now for a person and affiliation,
Yes.
and
No, there's not a-
anybody
There's not a way to do that. Yeah. So that's a good point. So say you are looking for the Bill Foreman who's at the CFA. Right now, we're looking for Bill Foreman anywhere in the author array. We're looking for affiliation anywhere in the author array. We're not guaranteeing that when we're searching for Bill Foreman and CFA, that it's Bill Foreman at the CFA, if that makes sense. We've had a couple people ask us about that, so we may think about trying to fix that in the future. we don't yet have an idea for that or have a fix for that. So be cautious. Okay, well, thank you all for coming. If you have any more questions, we'll be sticking around here for another hour or so. Please take cookies, please take coffee. But yeah, otherwise, thank you all for coming. And there'll be more talks later on this spring. We'll send out emails about all of those, and they'll be about more advanced topics than this. So if you have any specific interests, please keep an eye out for those. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly.